What if I told you that the heavy, immovable brick sensation sitting in your stomach after a steak dinner isn't proof that red meat is bad for you? What if that feeling is actually a screaming biological warning sign that your stomach's chemistry has completely shut down? We need to talk about a silent physiological crisis that is affecting millions of people right now. I see so many of you trying to do the right thing. You're trying to eat clean, you're watching your calories, but without realizing it, you are becoming metabolically fragile. Here is the typical scenario. You eat a steak or a burger, and for the next 4 to 6 hours, you feel bloated, heavy, and lethargic. It feels like the food is just sitting there, refusing to move. Naturally, you blame the meat. You tell yourself, red meat is just too heavy for me, or I guess I can't digest beef anymore now that I'm older. So you cut it out. You switch to salads or plain chicken. But by blaming the meat, you aren't just missing out on the most bioavailable nutrients on the planet, you are ignoring a dangerous low-acid environment in your gut. This isn't just about discomfort. This low-acid state creates a physiological domino effect. It leads to chronic acid reflux. It prevents you from absorbing B vitamins and iron, leading to anemia. And it traps you in a vicious cycle of deep fatigue. You think you are saving your digestion, but in reality, you are slowly starving your cells. And the telltale sign of this breakdown goes beyond just the indigestion. It is the infamous afternoon crash. I'm talking about that specific debilitating brain fog that descends on you at exactly 3 p.m. It's that moment where you need caffeine just to function. Or, pay attention to this. Do you feel an inexplicable chill in your hands and feet, even when the room is warm? These aren't just quirks of aging. These are red alert signals that your metabolic engines are misfiring because the fuel system is clogged. Today, we are going to stop blaming the food and start fixing the engine. To understand why this is happening, we have to decode a concept that almost nobody talks about. We need to look at the difference between the glycemic index and the insulin index. Most people are obsessed with the glycemic index. You think that only carbohydrates, like bread, pasta, or candy, spike your insulin. But here is the mechanism that trips everyone up. Refined, lean protein acts almost exactly like liquid sugar to your hormones. When you strip the fat away from the protein, you are removing the delivery mechanism. Without that natural fat matrix, lean protein floods your system, spiking your insulin and crashing your blood sugar just as hard as a bagel would. But when you eat fat, something magical happens. Fat triggers a hormone called cholecystokinin, or CCK. Think of CCK as your body's natural brake pedal. It physically slows down digestion and stabilizes your energy. To really see this, I want you to use a specific visualization. I call this the sponge versus the rock. First, visualize the sponge. This represents your refined, lean protein, that skinless chicken breast or that whey protein shake. Imagine taking a pitcher of water and pouring it onto a dry, cheap sponge. What happens? It saturates instantly. It gets heavy, it gets soggy, and it creates a mess. This is exactly what happens when lean protein hits your stomach. Because there is no fat to signal the brakes, the valve at the bottom of your stomach, the pyloric sphincter, stays wide open. The amino acids flood into the small intestine all at once. This causes a chaotic, rapid absorption that sends your insulin skyrocketing. You get the bloat, and then you get the crash. Now, contrast that with the rock. This represents a piece of steak with the fat on it, or an 80/20ths burger. Visualize pouring that same pitcher of water over a solid rock. The water doesn't soak in, it trickles off the sides slowly. It is controlled by the surface. This is what happens when you eat meat with its natural fat. The presence of that fat chemically signals the pyloric sphincter to physically tighten and close. Instead of a flood, the stomach contents are released in a slow, steady, controlled stream. You don't get the spike, and you don't get the crash. This is where the conventional advice has led us astray. We look at a heart-healthy, skinless chicken breast or a whey protein shake, and we see health. But physiologically, that shake is a metabolic disruptor. It acts like a sponge, flooding your system. On the other hand, that villainized 80/20ths grass-fed burger is actually a metabolic stabilizer. Its fat content makes it a rock, ensuring you get sustained energy rather than a hormonal roller coaster. So, how do we turn this science into a strategy you can use at your very next meal? It all comes down to one single first principle rule that I want you to memorize. Never eat naked protein. You must always consume protein within its natural fat matrix, or you must prime the stomach's acidic environment to handle it. If you strip the armor off the protein, you leave your digestion defenseless. Here is your 3-step blueprint to fixing this today. Step number 1 is what I call the acid primer. Think of this as the ignition switch for your digestion. Remember that brick feeling we talked about? That happens because your stomach acid is too weak to break down the food fibers. So, 15 minutes before your main meal, I want you to take 1 to 2 capsules of betaine hydrochloric acid with pepsin. If you don't have that, take 1 tablespoon of apple cider vinegar in a small glass of water. This isn't just an old wives' tale, it is chemistry. This primer physically lowers the pH of your stomach to between 1.5 and 3. This extreme acidity does 2 critical things. First, it activates the enzymes required to dissolve that brick of meat, turning it into liquid fuel. And second, and this is crucial, that high acidity signals your lower esophageal sphincter, the valve at the top of your stomach, to snap shut tight. This is actually how you prevent acid reflux. You don't need less acid, you need the right acid to keep the door closed. Step number 2 is the 80/20ths mandate. I need you to stop buying that lean 93/7 ground beef. Put it back on the shelf. It is metabolically incomplete. You need to switch strictly to 80/20ths ground beef. That 20% fat content is your bioavailability buffer. It provides the trigger for that CCK brake pedal we talked about, ensuring you digest slowly. Plus, it carries stearic acid, a specific fat that helps your mitochondria function and helps you actually absorb the iron from the meat. Now, I know some of you are worried about the cost of healthy food, so here is a specific tool tip for you. You don't need a specialty butcher. You can go straight to Walmart and look for the market-side brand organic grass-fed ground beef. It's usually the 80/20ths blend, and it often runs about $6.26 a pound. It is affordable, accessible, and most importantly, it is chemically correct for this protocol. Finally, step number 3 is the kinetic switch. This is the utilization phase. I want you to commit to a simple 10-minute walk immediately after you put down your fork. No excuses. When you walk, your large leg muscles contract and act as a glucose sink. They physically shuttle glucose and amino acids out of your bloodstream and into the tissue where they belong. This prevents the insulin spike and stops that post-meal coma in its tracks. You eat, you walk, and you win. Now, before you rush off to the grocery store, we need to have a serious reality check, because there is a massive myth standing in your way. I know exactly what many of you are thinking right now. You're thinking, but wait, I have terrible heartburn. My doctor told me I have too much acid. Adding more acid sounds insane. Here is the reality that the pharmaceutical commercials won't tell you. You likely do not have too much acid. You have hypochlorhydria, which is the medical term for low stomach acid. Remember the valve I mentioned earlier, the lower esophageal sphincter? It operates on a pH trigger. When your stomach is highly acidic, around a pH of 1 to 3, that valve senses the intensity and locks tight to protect your throat. But when your acid is weak, sitting at a pH of 4 or 5, that valve gets lazy. It doesn't seal completely. So even that weak, bubbly acid splashes up into your esophagus, burning you. When you take acid blockers, you are neutralizing the very chemistry you need to close that door. You are treating the symptom, but you are making the root cause, the low acid environment, permanently worse. This is why you can't digest meat, and this is why you aren't absorbing your minerals. However, I do have a critical doctor's note for a specific group of you. If you have been diagnosed with hemochromatosis, which is genetic iron overload, you must be careful with this protocol. Your body absorbs heme iron too efficiently, and red meat can be dangerous for you. Also, if you are currently taking statins, be aware that these drugs can blunt your body's natural satiety signals. You might not feel full when you should, so you will need to monitor your portion sizes consciously. But for the rest of you, I want you to realize something powerful. You are not a victim of bad genetics. You aren't suffering simply because of aging digestion. You are simply feeding a low-acid stomach with naked protein. That is a mismatch, not a disease. You now have the decoder keys. You know how to prime the acid, you know to respect the fat matrix, and you know to move the body. So here is my challenge to you. I don't want you to change your whole life overnight. For the next 7 days, I want you to make just one swap. Replace that healthy lean turkey lunch with a grass-fed 80-20 beef patty, no bun. Take your acid primer right before you eat it. Then, monitor your energy at 3 p.m. I guarantee you will notice that the brain fog, the crash, and the brick in your stomach are gone. And I want to hear from you. If you have ever felt that heavy brick sitting in your stomach after a meal, I want you to comment the word acid down below. Let's see how many of us have been unknowingly treating a low-acid problem with antacids. It's time to flip the script on your digestion. I'll see you in the comments.